I signed my closing papers on a Thursday morning in a conference room that smelled like burnt coffee and new carpet. The title agent slid the deed across the table with a tired smile and said, "Congratulations on your first home." I signed my name 11 times, each signature feeling heavier than the last, not because I was nervous, but because I was alone doing something I'd been told my whole life I couldn't do alone. No boyfriend, no co-signer, no family loan. Just me, my savings account, and a pre-approval letter I'd kept folded in my wallet for 6 months like a secret. The house was small. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen with counters someone had painted butter yellow in the 90s. It sat on a quiet street where people mowed their lawns on Saturday mornings and waved at you even if they didn't know your name yet. The kind of place where nothing dramatic was supposed to happen. I drove there straight from closing with the keys in my cup holder and this strange lightness in my chest, like maybe I'd finally done something that belonged only to me. I didn't post about it. I didn't send photos to the family group chat. I told my mom, my best friend Casey, and my coworker, who'd helped me figure out the mortgage process. That was it. Because in my family, anything that looked stable had a way of becoming community property. My sister Maribel had 3 kids, 2 different fathers, a rotation of apartments that never lasted more than 8 months, and a gift for making her emergencies sound like your moral responsibility. I knew the second I announced the house, she'd find a way to make it hers. So I didn't announce it. I moved in quietly over a weekend with Casey's help. We hauled my bed frame up the stairs, assembled my kitchen table, hung curtains I'd picked out myself, and for exactly 17 days, I lived in that house like it was mine. On day 18, I took the morning off work to go to the county records office. I needed to file an address update for utility registration. Boring adult stuff. The kind of errand that still felt surreal because until 3 weeks ago, I'd never owned anything that required paperwork with a notary stamp. The records office smelled like old paper and floor cleaner. There was a line of people holding folders, staring at their phones, waiting for numbers to be called. A TV in the corner played local news with the sound off. I stood there holding my documents, yet feeling weirdly proud of something as mundane as registering an address. When the clerk slid my papers back through the window and said, "Congratulations on your first home," I smiled without thinking. It felt quiet, private, the way I wanted it. Then my phone buzzed, a text from Maribel. "FYI, school enrollment needs an address by Friday. The kids will be using yours. It's easier this way." I read it twice. Then I read it again, because surely I'd misunderstood. I was still standing at the records office. I hadn't even finished registering my own utilities yet. I typed back slowly. "We need to talk about that." Her reply came instantly. "There's nothing to talk about. It's temporary. Don't make it weird." I stood there staring at the screen while the clerk called the next number. My hands felt cold. Maribel didn't ask for help. Why, she announced decisions like they were already done, and you were just catching up. I left the records office and sat in my car for 10 minutes before I could drive. Not because I was scared, because I was already calculating what would happen if I said no. That afternoon, I called her. She answered on speaker. I could hear her kids yelling in the background, something crashing, her voice sharp telling someone to stop. "I'm not agreeing to that," I said. I kept my tone even. "The house isn't set up for it." She sighed, loud, performative. "You have 2 bedrooms," she said. "You live alone. You work all day. This actually helps you." "I didn't buy it to help," I said. "I bought it to live in." There was a pause. Then her voice shifted. Softer, more controlled. "I already told the school," she said. "If you back out now, it makes me look unstable." That word landed hard. Unstable. Like my boundary was the thing that would hurt her kids, not her decision to commit them to an address she didn't own. "You can't just use my address without asking," I said. "I'm not using it," she replied, voice brightening like she was being reasonable. "The kids are, temporarily, until I figure things out." "How long is temporary?" I asked. She laughed. "I don't know. Does it matter? You're not even using the second bedroom." My jaw tightened. Maribel, I'm serious. So am I, she said. And then her tone went cold. You really want to be the aunt who says no to kids who need stability? She hung up before I could answer. I sat there holding my phone, staring at my kitchen, the one I'd just unpacked, the one that was supposed to be mine. 2 days later, night I got an email from the school district. Subject, address verification pending. They needed proof of residency for 3 children at my address. Utility bills, lease agreement, or deed with occupant confirmation. I hadn't submitted anything. Someone else had. I forwarded the email to Maribel with one line. You need to fix this. She replied within minutes. Relax. It's just paperwork. Nobody's going to check. I stared at that message until the words stopped making sense. Just paperwork. Like my address was a form she could fill out casually. Like my home was a box she could check. The next escalation came 4 days later. My bank called. A woman from the compliance department. Polite but formal. She said they were conducting a routine review related to my mortgage and needed to confirm occupancy status. Are there any additional residents in the home? She asked. Specifically minors? I answered honestly. No. There was a pause. We received conflicting information, she said. My stomach dropped. From who? I can't disclose the source, she replied. But it triggered a compliance check. If occupancy doesn't match your mortgage terms, it could affect your agreement. I wrote down the date and time of the call on a notepad. Then I started a folder. Maribel showed up at my house that Saturday, unannounced. I heard the car doors slam first. Then her voice, bright and loud, telling the kids to grab their backpacks. I opened the front door and saw all 3 of them standing on my porch. The oldest, 9 years old, was holding a duffel bag. The youngest was clutching a stuffed bear. Maribel smiled at me like this was normal. Figured we'd stop by so they could see their rooms, she said. Their rooms? I repeated. She stepped past me into my house without waiting for permission. The kids followed, uncertain, glancing at me like they weren't sure if they were supposed to be there. This is where you'll be staying, Maribel said to them, gesturing around my living room like she was giving a tour. Isn't it nice? I didn't yell. I didn't argue in front of the kids. I said quietly, This isn't happening today. Maribel turned to me, still smiling, but her eyes were sharp. You hear that? She said loudly, to no one in particular. She glanced toward my neighbor's yard across the street. She's kicking us out. My neighbor was watering her flowers. She looked up. Maribel waved at her, all warmth and performance. I stepped between Maribel and the hallway leading to the bedrooms. We need to leave, I said. She stared at me for a long moment. Then she laughed softly, turned to the kids and said, Come on, she's not ready yet. They left. I closed the door and stood there, shaking, not from fear, but from the realization that she was building something. That night, Maribel posted on social media, It's hard when family refuses to support kids in crisis. Some people care more about their space than their nieces and nephews. No names. But anyone who knew us would know. The comments piled up. Supportive. Outraged on her behalf. I didn't respond. I took a screenshot and saved it to the folder. The pattern became clearer after that. School forms submitted without my knowledge. Bank compliance flags. Public posts framing me as selfish. Or witnesses, like my neighbor, being positioned to see me as the problem. Maribel wasn't just trying to move her kids into my house. She was building a record, a narrative, a case. And she was doing it in systems that didn't know me. Systems that only saw paperwork and appearances. The breaking point came on a Tuesday afternoon. I was working from home when someone knocked on my door. A woman, mid-40s, calm face, holding a clipboard. Hi, she said. I'm Denise Marsh. I'm a family services caseworker. I'm following up on a report regarding housing instability. My stomach turned over. A report? I said. She nodded. May I come in? I let her in because refusing felt worse. She didn't sit. She stood in my living room, glancing around, taking notes. Do 3 children live at this address? She asked. No, I said. She wrote something down. Are you currently providing housing for family members? She asked. No, I said again. Have you been asked to provide housing? I hesitated. I was told it was happening. I wasn't asked. She looked up at me, eyes steady. Can you clarify that? I pulled out my phone and showed her Maribel's original text. The kids will be using yours. It's easier. Denise read it, took a photo of the screen with her own phone. Has there been any written agreement? She asked. No, I said. I never agreed. She nodded slowly. I'm going to need to speak with the children's mother. That's when Maribel arrived. Perfect timing. She knocked once, then opened my front door like she had a key. Oh, she said, stopping when she saw Denise. She looked surprised, then hurt. I didn't think she'd actually call someone. I hadn't called anyone. Denise introduced herself. Maribel's face shifted into something softer, fragile. I'm sorry, Maribel said. My sister's been under a lot of stress since she bought this place. I think it's been overwhelming for her. There it was. The reframe. I wasn't protecting my home. I was unstable. Denise didn't react emotionally. She just took notes. Ms. Reyes, she said to Maribel, did you file school enrollment using this address? Maribel hesitated. I mean, yes, but it's temporary. She said it was fine. I didn't, I said. Denise looked at me. Do you have documentation of that? I pulled out my folder. The original text where Maribel announced the decision. The school district email I'd forwarded asking her to fix it. Her reply, relax. It's just paperwork. The call log from the bank compliance check. Screenshots of her social media posts. I laid them on my kitchen table like evidence in a trial I hadn't known I was in. Denise looked at each one. Then she looked at Maribel. When did you receive written consent to use this address? She asked. Maribel's mouth opened, closed. I mean, it's family. Denise nodded slowly. Family doesn't replace documentation, she said. The room went quiet. Denise scheduled a follow-up meeting. Neutral location, municipal building, conference room with too many chairs and fluorescent lights that hummed. Maribel brought printed screenshots, texts without timestamps, photos of my house from the outside, taken from the street. I brought my folder, everything dated, everything sourced, utility start dates showing I'd been the only resident. She mortgage documents with my name alone, the compliance call notes, the email thread with the school. Denise didn't react emotionally. She lined the papers side by side on the table. She asked Maribel one question. At any point, did your sister provide written consent for the children to live at her address? Maribel shifted in her seat. She didn't say no. That's not the same as yes, Denise replied. Maribel's face flushed. This is ridiculous. She has space. She's being selfish. Denise didn't argue. She just wrote something down and said, I'll be noting this as a misrepresentation of housing status. The word hung in the air. Misrepresentation. Not family dispute, not miscommunication. Misrepresentation. Within a week, the school flagged the address as invalid. The bank closed their compliance review with a note on file. Denise's report included the word I'd been too afraid to say out loud. Fraud, not criminal, not yet, but documented. Maribel went silent after that. No texts, no posts, no surprise visits. I learned later, through a mutual friend, that Maribel had been telling people for months that my house would solve her problem, that once I bought it, she'd make it work. She hadn't seen my house as something I earned. She'd seen it as a solution she was entitled to. A few weeks after the meeting, I got a letter. Not from Denise. From a law office. It wasn't a lawsuit. It was a notice. Maribel had filed for emergency housing assistance and listed my address as her primary residence with family. She was still trying. But this time, I had a record. I called the office listed on the letter. Spoke to a paralegal who sounded bored until I mentioned the caseworker's report. You have documentation of misrepresentation? She asked. Yes, I said. Send it. I did. 2 days later, the application was flagged and denied. I got a follow-up call from the housing assistance office asking if I wanted to file a formal complaint. I didn't. I just wanted it to stop. But I kept the letter. Nothing is fully resolved. There's still a review pending with the school district. Still tension at family gatherings I don't attend anymore. Still systems watching quietly, tracking discrepancies. But my house is mine. My address belongs to me. And somewhere in a file cabinet, a record exists showing exactly who tried to rewrite reality and who didn't have to raise their voice to stop it. I keep thinking about how close it came down to paperwork alone. How if I hadn't started that folder, if I hadn't saved those texts, if I hadn't documented the dates and times and exact words, how many people lose things not because they're wrong, but because someone else writes the narrative first. Maribel didn't need to live in my house to take it. She just needed systems to believe she already did. And I wonder how often that works. How many people say yes because no feels too complicated to prove? How many boundaries collapse not under force, but under paperwork and performance, and the assumption that family means access? I didn't win because I was louder. I won because I was boring, because I kept records, because I answered questions with documents instead of emotions, because I let the systems correct themselves instead of trying to fight her in the arena she'd built. My mom called me last week, first time in a month. "You really couldn't just help her out?" she asked. Not angry, just tired. "I couldn't let her take my house," I said. "She wasn't taking it," my mom replied. "She was just using the address." And that's the thing. To her, it was just an address. To me, it was the first thing I'd ever owned that no one could take away. Except they almost did. Not with force. Not with violence. With paperwork. With assumption. With the quiet belief that my no didn't count as much as her need. The house still smells like fresh paint. I repainted the second bedroom last weekend. The one Maribel told her kids would be theirs. It's my office now. I hung the deed on the wall. Framed. Not because I'm petty. Because I need to see it. I need to remember that the difference between keeping something and losing it came down to a folder full of boring documents and the willingness to be the villain in someone else's story. Would you have done it differently? Would you have let them in and hoped it stayed temporary? Or would you have built the folder too? Tell me in the comments.